Hello, everyone. Welcome to another wonderful session. We are here with Verlinda, Ruble. Teachable Moments that Lead to Thematic Units is going to be our session today. So we're super excited, Verlinda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yes. Next slide, please. This first disclaimer, I'm sorry, says that UAGC is not responsible or endorse any of the information, pictures, etc. in this presentation. Next slide, please. And this slide just says that an online degree from UAGC does not lead to immediate teacher licensure in any state. So if you are graduating from UAGC in the education department, you will need to go back to your individual state and make sure that you follow their procedures for becoming a teacher. Next slide, please. All right, so we're super excited to have Verlinda Ruble here with us today. She began her journey in the educational field in 1986. She began her career in the Head Start community as a special service aide. She went to Warner Southern College, now Warner University, for her bachelor's in special ed. Verlinda also worked as a special ed teacher in a deaf school where she learned American Sign Language and how to use augmentative communication devices. In 2005, her world turned upside down when her oldest son returned home as a disabled war veteran. She spent her downtime in the VA waiting rooms, working to earn a master's degree in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis on computer education. Verlinda's educational pursuits and hands-on work experiences have been instrumental in helping her to develop the strategies that she needs to teach students in the early education field. And Verlinda, you always have amazing topics and information to share with us. So we are super excited you're here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So let's just jump right in. We're going to step into a teachable moment with purpose. I can't encourage you enough to just look at your students and decide what they are interested in as we go along. And then when they ask questions, don't worry about your time. I know we all have way too much on our plates. Don't worry about that, but focus on your student and actively listen to your student to find out what it is that interests them, what motivates them, and then reflect on how that interest can be incorporated into your state standards and your thematic units, and then make a plan for it. As you know, if we don't plan, we usually don't get to everything that we need to do. So take that moment and teach to your students' interests. So my first example is going to be about a little girl, and she's 4 years old and in kindergarten. And we're going to take our first standard, and she is interested in all things that fly. And that's because her father is a pilot. So she's just really interested in that. So we're going to discuss based on the standard for Florida, and I did pull the Florida state standards. And it's from the physical science, scientific inquiry, C, physical and science, demonstrates knowledge related to physical science. The benchmark A discusses what makes objects move the way they do and how the movement can be controlled. Of course, each lesson in our unit can address other state standards, but when you're creating a thematic unit based on a teachable moment, you want to make sure you narrow down your scope a bit so that you're not hitting everywhere, and you can really plan and make sure that you're hitting that one standard. So my students' interests we have our standard, and we are going to base our standard on the thematic unit of transportation. And that's a good step in planning. In the next slide here, you see that we have a brainstorming tool, and many of us are familiar with that. But if you're not, you pick one word, and then you ask how, what, when, why, where, who, and then your students brainstorm each one of these questions with you, and then you get a lot of little details about where their interests lie. So you can have your favorite student, your students share their favorite thing that they have seen or done or want to see or do this year. And this could be your layout for the whole year. And write down any subtopics because you might need to pick up on those subtopics later in that year, and make a connection between that main interest and another subtopic that applies. For example, we're going to take from the Creative Commons, that's where our image looks at, and we're going to write down on the board each one of the child's answers when we ask a question like, who has ever rode in an airplane before or a helicopter, and then what was that like? And then some students might say they were afraid or they were terrified, depending on the vocabulary set they use, or that they went on a vacation if we ask why, and they were on a road trip, that they heard the captain talk on the intercom. There's lots of little details you can get based on the children's experiences. And this also goes back to our KWHL graphic organizer for planning. So we're going to have that chart out and we're going to look at it, and the first one is we're going to find out, what do you already know about your topic? Some students have never been in an airplane, never been to an airport, and other students have flown every year to see their grandparents or their uncles or aunts. So you're going to have a lot of different levels of background knowledge there. And make sure that you give every child a chance to answer their questions and to share what they already know. And then, and everyone can participate in this. What do you want to know about your topic? And students may want to know, I've had students ask questions about, well, how does something that big get off the ground? How does it fly? And we'll write that down, that question, how does an airplane fly? How does it get off the ground? And then we'll keep that list on the board, and we'll stop there and we'll come back to it. But we're going to take each question and we're going to find out how they can find out more information on that topic. And we will be circling back around to this graphic organizer from time to time. So another thing that I love to do is to use in my transportation theme, or any theme that I have, is I go into the library, very close relationship with your librarians in your community and at your schools or center. I encourage you to do that. And you'll find that they are more than eager to help you find developmentally appropriate books for your classroom readings corner, and for books for you to read to your students daily. You cannot overlook that. It's so important to their language and development. You want to make sure that you always leave enough time to read, I would say, at least 2 books a day. So you want to do that, and picture books are wonderful. Children love the Richard Scarry's book. They have a wonderful book called A Day at the Airport, and this one has lots of images, and it will hold your students' interest for a long time. There's fiction books that you can obtain, and I have a few listed here, but there's more. You want to talk about the first heroes of flight, make sure that you have historical books in there, Wilbur and Orville Wright, and other books that apply. And then for your STEM book, I chose the Whoosh Easy paper airplane for kids, color, fold, and fly. Wonderful activity for children to do at home and at school. The rainy days, paper airplanes. For those of you that like Pinterest and have heard of Pinterest, you can go online and you can find very elaborate airplanes to build. And then there's the specific interest books like Fly Girl Fly by Shasta Way Soars. And that's a book about a girl that flies around the world. So children will enjoy that, and they'll be able to connect to other people like them, like little girls, for instance. And why a word wall? Well, this is the other element to all of my thematic units is to have a word wall. And you can make a word wall from laminated cards like you see on this screen. And you can put them, if you have a magnetic board, you can put them on the screen on your boards magnetically. Or if you don't and you have Velcro, you can put them on a board with Velcro. And that way students can get them off and take them back to their desks and use those words and be interactive with those words. You can have games with the words. And I like, this image doesn't really have it, but it has the words, but it doesn't have the images. I like to put the words and the images so any non-readers in my classroom will have access to that. The next thing that we're going to look at is our paper airplane designs. And we're going to look at the different ways that we can use this as a poem to transition from circle to workstations. We're going to use instructional transitions. And so we're going to send our students off to their workstations, but we're going to use a poem to get them there. And that way they're introduced to more literature. And when the students are finished, we're going to call one workstation at a time to give a flight test for each plane and have the children use vocabulary words to describe their flight. The next thing that we're going to do is create a graphic organizer. Team Runway 1 is going to be one team of students. Team Runway 2 is going to be a next team of students. And Team Runway 3 is going to be our third team of students. And Team Runway 4 is going to be our fourth runway. And this one, they are actually addressing a math standard. And they're going to be measuring after they sail their airplanes across the room. They're going to measure how far their plane flew. And let's say that one runway 2 was able to get their plane to go 6 blocks, and they can take their blocks out and measure with that blocks. That's a non-standard unit of measurement for our students so that they can get used to measuring in a developmentally appropriate way before we introduce rulers and yardsticks to them. And the wonderful thing about this is we have introduced science with lift and in flying the airplanes, and we have introduced math. So this is actually a very STEM-based activity. Other learning stations in our classroom that we're going to set up as part of our thematic unit is to set up perhaps in our dramatic play area an airport security check. We're going to set up the airplane with chairs for the captains and the passengers. We're going to set up the costume areas for pilots and FSA personnel. Airport restaurant for snacks can be set up, and then the block station. And I love to bring in toys that have the airport, perhaps the gasoline tankers and the airplanes, and allow the students to build the buildings to make their own airports. And then we'll have the computer and the art station. Excuse me. I have been fighting a little bit of a cold. And then our last part is our interviews, the presentations, and field trips. And field trips can be done in real life or through virtual field trips. Be sure your field trip is developmentally appropriate. And interviews and our presentations can be arranged with a family member or other profession. Excuse me. Be sure to prepare your student. Sorry. And we're back. So what have we learned? And that's something that we're going to review with our students carefully. And I'd like for you to begin your own learning adventure with a thematic unit of your very own. I do apologize. My allergy has been a little bit under the weather lately.
Verlinda, that's okay. We all get to when we're talking have that kind of issue. Thank you so much. I think thematic units are something that is very important and vital for an early childhood classroom. I know that my classroom community was full of centers that also covered thematic units. And so thank you so much for being here today, and we truly appreciate you.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, Verlinda, and have a great day.
You too.